Welcome to the Reed and Christine Halliday Lecture Series. I'm Bob Allen. I'm Dean of the Woodbury School of Business, and I'm delighted to welcome all of you here today and delighted to welcome our special guest and speaker today, Dr. Christine Botosan. Christine was appointed to the Financial Accounting Standards Board on July 1st of 2016 and later reappointed for a second 5-year term that ends in June of 26. Prior to joining the FASB, Dr. Botosan served as professor of accounting at the David Eccles School of Business at the University of Utah. She has broad knowledge of accounting issues with particular expertise in the areas of financial statement analysis and valuation. She served in a variety of roles during her tenure as a professor at University of Utah. She served as in the David Eccles School of Business as a leadership fellow in the Office of the Vice President, as the George S. and Dolores Doré Eccles Presidential Chair in Ethical Financial Reporting, and she also served as Associate Dean for Graduate Affairs in the School of Business. She served as a lecturer at Wilfrid Laurier prior to being a professor at Washington University in St. Louis. She's a chartered professional accountant of Canada, and she received her PhD in business administration from the University of Michigan and a bachelor's degree in business administration from Wilfrid Laurier University in Ontario, Canada. Now, so that's the official bio. Christine is also a dear friend. We were colleagues together at University of Utah for many years. Another of our colleagues, Dr. Martha Eining, is here with us today, and acknowledge her. And Christine is a terrific person. She is ideally suited to be a member of the Financial Accounting Standards Board. I know that a lot of you are not, don't have accounting backgrounds and are not pursuing accounting, but I just wanted to offer just a little bit of perspective of the importance of Christine's job as a member of the Financial Accounting Standards Board. These are the 7 individuals who make the accounting rules. Whatever accounting students are studying in their accounting books, these are rules that were created by the Financial Accounting Standards Board. And you think about the function of accounting, it is an important function in our society. There's limited capital and lots of people. Who here wants more money, right? Everybody wants more money. Businesses need more of it. Capital is in limited supply and more is wanted than is available. And accounting rules are an important part of how that capital gets distributed. You think about the most successful companies in the world today, financially successful companies, you've got your Googles and your Amazons. Back when they were getting going, they had some others that were trying to do what they eventually accomplished. And some of those companies got capital and some of those didn't. And the ones that didn't, you've never heard of. And the ones that did, we use every day and all the time. And accounting is an important part of the decision process of who gets capital and succeeds and who doesn't get capital and who doesn't succeed. And the Financial Accounting Standards Board creates the rules to create a fair playing field in which all of those companies operate to report the results of their operations. And so I've been looking forward to today for quite a while and appreciate Christine's willingness to come and speak to us and share some of her leadership experiences and her experiences on the board. And I turn the stage to Dr. Christine Botosan. While she's coming up, one more thing. She also used to be a drummer in a rock band.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. It's such a pleasure to be with you all today, and Bob did such a nice job of explaining a little bit about the Financial Accounting Standards Board and what we do there, so I really appreciate him providing that background. So I actually find it much easier to talk about debits and credits than myself. But I'm going to do my best to avoid such matters today. And instead, I'm going to follow Dean Allen's advice and focus on my career journey and the lessons that I've learned along the way, and some of the events and experiences that acted as my teacher. I entitled my presentation Dream Without a Doubt because there are several points in that journey where doubt could have led to a very different decision. And that would have made all the difference. In fact, I have no doubt that I would not be standing in front of you in this moment if doubt had gotten its way. So I knew early on that I really enjoyed accounting. All the way back in high school, I loved accounting. I loved teaching accounting. I liked thinking about accounting. I guess I'm just a total accounting nerd. Anyway, it was a very easy decision for me to follow that path into college. My husband, Monty, who's with me today, and actually my youngest son is sitting right beside him. Monty and I met in high school, and we married when I was 18 years old. And we essentially started college together. The first 10 years of our marriage were very lean years. I can share that at one point we were so tight on money that I actually bought canned mackerel because it was the only thing we could afford. And I thought, well, there's surely something I can do to make this edible. I can tell you there is nothing you can do to canned mackerel to make it edible. Just don't go there. But anyway, we often now joke about the house that we rented back then to save money. It was built in 1898, and it was literally condemned after we moved out. Sound? There we go, we're back. So the squirrels would come in the holes in the roof at night, and they would run around the attic, and they would keep us up at night. And in the wintertime, it would get so cold in that house that there would be frost that would form on the inside of the walls. So this was a pretty poor place to have to live. But we saved enough money living there to pay off our student loans. We had some really great parties because it didn't really matter what we did to this place. It was already a dump. And we built some very good memories of that place. Now, deciding to marry at such a young age was very unusual where we grew up. In fact, we were the only married students in the entire university. They didn't have married students residence at the university where we went. We actually had to get residence at the university down the street. So that was a very unusual thing for us to get together so young, and yet we didn't doubt that we were going to make it work, and so we did. And deciding to go to college at the same time with $100 in the bank, no family financial support, well, that was crazy, really, when I think back on it. And yet we didn't doubt that somehow we were going to make it work, so we did. Now, after several years of both of us working in public accounting, we were finally getting on our feet financially when I decided that I wanted to pursue an academic career. And I had been teaching part-time at that point at a local university where we lived, and I knew that I loved to teach. But I also knew that advancing in a career in the academic world meant getting a PhD. So we quit our jobs, we packed up, we moved from Canada to the United States so that I could start the PhD program at the University of Michigan. Now, once again, our family and friends thought we were crazy. And I have to say, I think that that was a fair assessment. But sometimes pursuing a dream requires a bit of crazy. It's not about believing naively that it's going to be easy or ignoring the possibility that you might actually fail in the end, because that's always a possibility. It's about not focusing on everything that could go wrong, but instead focusing on what could go right. It's about not letting fear stop you from taking your best shot at an opportunity. So in any event, Monty got a job at Deloitte in Windsor, Ontario. I started the PhD program at the University of Michigan, and every morning we would go our separate ways. He would cross the border to go to work, and I would head to Ann Arbor for school. Now, there were many ups and downs in the PhD program, and many moments that I felt far from the smartest person in the room. But the biggest challenge came when I started to look for a dissertation topic. Our eldest son had just been born. He was just weeks old. And I was trying to juggle being a good new mom and finding a topic that was going to pass muster with my dissertation chairman. 12 months of running down blind alleys and finally finding a topic only to discover that someone more senior to me was already working on that question and was much further ahead than I was when I found the topic. I was getting desperate. I really thought, I'm never going to find a dissertation topic. And then I read about a theoretical debate that was taking place about whether information risk matters in the pricing of equity securities. And that struck me as the perfect topic. There was no empirical evidence on either side of the debate. It was a topic that I really cared about because I'd always been interested in accounting because I felt that it played a really important role in the capital markets, and I truly believed that it helped to reduce information risk, and it struck me as stunning that no one had ever been able to demonstrate that empirically. So I decided that I was going to conduct an empirical test to assess the relationship between the amount of disclosure that companies provide in their annual reports and their cost of equity capital. And I broached the subject with my dissertation chairman, and he agreed. He said that's a really important, very fundamental question. But he also said, and I'm pretty sure this is a quote, because I remember this moment so well, standing in his office, and I'm standing in front of his desk, and he's sitting down, and he's looking at me, and he said, I don't know how you're going to measure the amount of disclosure, and I don't know how you're going to measure cost of equity capital, but if you can work those two things out, then you're going to have a paper that will win awards. And I know when I stood there, I understood, even in that moment, that what he was saying to me was, are you crazy? Like, there's no research done on this question because nobody knows how to measure either of those two things. It's really going to be almost impossible to get done. But again, I didn't decide to press on because I naively thought it was going to be easy or riskless. I decided to press on because I was excited about the question and I really wanted to know the answer. And I leapt and took what I realize now, probably even more so as I've gotten older, a very risky strategy for a PhD student. But again, instead of focusing on everything that could go wrong, I decided to take my best shot, and when the inevitable challenges arose, and they did, there were many, many times when I thought, I'm not going to make it, I'm not going to get this done, I just figured out a way to work through or around the problem to the best of my ability. I'm proud to say that the paper that came out of my dissertation has been cited over 6,500 times. It won both the American Accounting Association's Competitive Manuscript Award and also the Notable Contribution to Accounting Research Award. But more importantly, that crazy risk as a PhD student had a huge payoff in terms of the career opportunities that followed. The success of that paper laid the foundation for really everything that has come since, and that has ultimately led to my time on the Financial Accounting Standards Board. Now, if someone had told me when I was an undergraduate student that my career path was going to end up at the Financial Accounting Standards Board, I would have thought they were crazy. But Michigan led to Washington University in St. Louis, and that led to the University of Utah, which ultimately led to the Financial Accounting Standards Board. And along the way, I had the very best partner in the world. Together, we raised 2 sons and supported each other so that we could both find success in our careers. Every time I changed jobs, Monty had to move. That came with a fair amount of cost to him, but also with considerable benefit, because having to change jobs led him from being a manager at Deloitte to a controller of a manufacturing company to ultimately CFO at a biotech startup. And it was under his excellent financial leadership that that company grew from 15 employees when he joined them to 500 employees when it ultimately sold, which is why he retired at 53 and I'm still working. You'd think he'd share, right? No, anyway, that's accountants for you. Anyway, upon reflection, there are 5 key lessons that I wanted to share with you from the journey that we took together. So the first lesson that I wanted to share is that everybody struggles. Everybody struggles. And it's really in how you choose to manage the struggles in your life that make the difference. So when I was 10 years old, my father passed away. And my mom, who was a homemaker, was left with 4 children, no real work skills whatsoever, and very limited financial resources. And we struggled to make ends meet. And looking back, I now understand just how close to the financial edge we lived. I remember being 11 years old, and we'd lost our house, and we were living in someone's basement. But it didn't really occur to me. I knew my mom was taking care of me, and we just sort of muddled on through. There was certainly no money for college, but I never felt disadvantaged. In fact, I felt very lucky to live in a country that provided a safety net for struggling families, and fortunate to have a family who provided support, not measured in dollars and cents, but in the loving support that is infinitely more valuable. The lesson 2 that I wanted to share with you is that it is okay to fail. It's okay to fail provided you learn something from the experience. That's the key. I got fired from the first job I ever had. I was about 13 years old. Money was tight, so I had decided to sign up for a paper route delivering the Wall Street Journal to make some extra money. I was a truly terrible employee. There was nothing I could do, no matter how hard I thought I was trying. I could not seem to get those papers on the doorstep by 6 a.m., which was the only job requirement that I had. That was all they expected me to do. So after about a month, I was relieved of my duties, and I learned something from that experience. I learned that not all jobs are for everyone, and that it is incredibly difficult to be successful at whatever it is that you choose to do, unless you really care about what it is and you really need to enjoy what you're doing. And if you don't have those 2 things going for you, it can be really difficult to be successful. The third lesson that I wanted to share is that it is okay to make mistakes. It's a fact. Everybody makes mistakes. It's what you do about it when it happens that really makes the difference. So I'll give you an example of a mistake that I made a couple years ago on a paper that I was working on with some co-authors. We collected the data, we analyzed it, we checked each other's work, we wrote it up, we collected feedback on the first couple drafts of the paper, we revised it in response to that feedback, and we thought we had crossed every T and dotted every I. And still, after I distributed the paper to colleagues and we had submitted it for publication at a journal, we realized that there was a mistake in one of the tables, and it made a difference. So when you discover you've made a mistake, you always have a choice, right? You can choose to let the fear of embarrassment or repercussions to drive a decision, to try to sweep the mistake under the rug and hope that nobody notices. But that would be a much bigger intentional mistake, much worse than the initial unintentional mistake. A mistake is really an opportunity to learn and possibly to leave things better than they were. And you owe it to yourself and everyone around you to not let that opportunity pass by. So that mistake that we made in that paper, we realized we made it because we had inadequate experience manipulating XBRL data. And that was a pervasive weakness among accounting academics at the time. So after we fixed the paper and sent the revised version to all of the people who had received the previous version with an explanation as to what had changed, I approached the FASB's XBRL team with a proposal to develop a hands-on training program to improve academics' use of XBRL data in research and in the classroom. The FASB's XBRL research team was concerned that because many academics did not know how to access the data or how to properly analyze XBRL data, that the data was not getting the kind of use that it should, and that there was a significant risk of operator error among academics, and I and my co-authors were sort of Exhibit A in that respect. So they were thrilled when I approached them with the idea of putting together a training program. We now have financial support from an XBRL data aggregator, academic partners who who did co-develop and team teach the program, buy-in from the American Accounting Association, who provided us with a venue to roll out the program. And that has now been going on for 3 years, and the effort of continuing to improve academics' use of research in the classroom and of data, XBRL data in research and in the classroom has now been taken over by a steering committee of academics who are passionate about that issue. So today, nobody remembers, other than me, and maybe all of you after this talk, that I made a mistake in a paper that I had submitted for publication. But everyone is aware of the advances that we have made in improving academics' use of XBRL data. The fourth lesson that I wanted to share is about leadership. I remember being an undergraduate student in business school, worrying about what makes a leader, wondering if being a leader was something you had to be born with or whether it was something that you could learn over time. It took me a long time to figure out that there isn't really anything special about being a leader. Anyone can be a leader. You just need enough confidence to stand up and make your opinions known to others. But being a good leader, that is an entirely different thing. Being a good leader takes more than confidence. It takes courage. It takes the courage to make tough decisions when no one else wants to accept the burden. It takes the courage to stand up for what is right when no one else is willing to raise their hand. And to be a good leader, you really need to listen to the needs of others, not your own needs. Being a good leader is not something that you're born with, but it is something that all of us is capable of developing into. All right, the last lesson, and then I'm going to throw it open for Q&A. So the last lesson I have to share is that dreaming without a doubt and working hard pay off. If you ask Monty, he would probably say that I have a tendency to leap before I look. But I like to think that I'm just an optimist who prefers not to think too deeply about all of the pitfalls before acting. Fear of failure and self-doubt can be paralyzing. It can stop us from taking risks, from accepting challenging opportunities, from discovering new things about ourselves and about the world around us. I believe that a life without risk really is a life unlived. So if you take one thing from my presentation today, I hope it is that you will let yourself dream without a doubt. because I have no doubt that if you do, you will be amazed and delighted by all that you will accomplish. Thanks. All right, happy to take any questions.
Yeah. For us who are starting and learning, what are some questions that you would advise us to ask so that we can learn some things that we don't even know we don't know?
I think the most important question that I've asked throughout my career has always been why. You know, you see something, why is it that way? Why isn't it this other way? And in fact, one of the things that I've been working on for the last 6 or 7 years is a book on the theory of accounting, trying to help myself and hopefully someday others understand why it is that things get presented in financial statements the way that they do, why they don't get presented in other ways, and why that does or does not provide useful information to investors. And so I would say that just that intellectual curiosity, always of asking why, can lead to a lot of interesting avenues that you can go down. What a great question. Thank you for that. I've never been asked that question before. That was a good one.
Hi, I was wondering if there was any book that you've read that you felt kind of helped you develop this mindset of having kind of like a very positive outlook to challenges.
Wow, you know, during COVID, I started doing something which I hope I don't get to the end of too soon, because it was called the 100 Books That You Should Read Before You Die. So I'm hoping that, I'm afraid that if I get to the end of the list, we know what the outcome might be. So I have been reading through those books, and there are so many amazing books out there for us to learn important things from. Some of which, are classics, and some of which are more modern books. So I'll share, I wouldn't say it's necessarily the positive outlook necessarily, because this was actually a pretty dark book. But what I would say is that every single one of those books has made me think, and think deeply. So the one I finished most recently was Frankenstein. I know, how many people have read Frankenstein, like the original Frankenstein? Wow, that is a really powerful book. And it was really interesting to realize that Dr. Frankenstein's monster, who we think of as Frankenstein, really, it wasn't clear by the end of the book who was the monster. You know, whether it was Dr. Frankenstein who had rejected this creation that he had made and turned the monster into this terrible being, or if it was the monster himself who did all these terrible things. So I would just say the thing that I enjoy, I love to read, and the thing that I love about reading is just reading widely across all different genres, and then just learning from those experiences. And so I have to say, though, I have never been really into reading self-help books. I don't read too many, I like fiction, primarily fiction. What's your favorite book?
Me, I read like fantasy books too. Have you read Six of Crows by Bardugo?
No.
It's really good.
Okay, Six of Crows. All right, I'm going to look for that one. Thank you. Is it a series?
Yeah, it's a duology, so there's just two.
Okay, because when I hit a book that's on the list that's a series, then I read the entire series too, and I figure that'll take longer than to get to the 100th book. So that's how I'm trying to keep it going. So thank you. I'm going to write that one down so I don't forget the name. Hi.
Did I turn it off? So you mentioned in your presentation how between you and Monty's career, how you kind of had to move a lot and change career paths to support each other. And I was just wondering what kind of advice you would give in kind of balancing that growing your own career as well as supporting your spouse's career through the different challenges that you would have to face in life.
Yeah, boy, I'll tell you, it wasn't without its stress and without its arguments and without its difficulties. So I think that it helped a lot that one of us had a career that was transportable. It would have been very, very difficult, I think, if there's only so many places you can move to as a professor. You got to go to a college town. It's got to be, right? As an accountant, there was always accounting jobs. So that provided the ability for him to be what did they call you? The trailing spouse, I think was what you were called once. So it allowed Monty to change positions, but still continue to advance his career. I do think that one thing that's important within the relationship is to have a joint agreement as to are we gonna both try to support one another, or does it work better for our family that we make a different decision? So for example, would it work better for our family that someone commit to being at home and another person commit to being the breadwinner? But however you do that, I think it's just really important for that to be a joint decision. And I think that's what made the difference for us, was that even as, we were making these decisions and it was super hard, sometimes when it was time to move again and make that change, at the end of the day, even though we would have some arguments along the way, it ended up being a joint decision. So I knew that fundamentally, he was okay with making that move, and that I was okay with making the move. And we were going to do everything in our power to try to make it easier for the other person. I think one of Monty's greatest qualities is he's an incredibly loyal person. Man, he's stuck with me for 43 years, so he's got to be a pretty loyal person. But I think that if he had not had to move, he would still be working at his first job. So, sometimes when those things are happening and they seem like, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing and it's the end of the world and I'm going to have to move again, it's just sort of believing that it's going to be okay and you're going to find a path and you're going to support each other through this and you're going to listen to each other. You're going to try to help one another. It's really just working together as partners. But it wasn't easy. I won't, there were some tearful nights and some good round arguments. I remember when it came time for me to leave Washington University. And we had decided to go there, so it was a joint decision, to go to Washington University in St. Louis because they had a 10-year tenure clock, whereas most other schools it's 6 or 7 years. So we thought, okay, well, we'd moved to Michigan, been there for 5 years, now we're moving again. And so the one commitment that I made is, okay, we'll go to WashU because I can stay there for 10 years, and if I don't get tenure, at least we had 10 years somewhere. 4 years into being there, I was desperately unhappy. I was working 7 days a week. I was coming home from the office at 3 o'clock in the morning, getting up at 6 to go back. Brady hadn't been born yet, but Brendan, our oldest, was 4 or 5 years old. I never got to see him. I was given the message at work that, well, isn't your husband going to stay home and take care of the kids so you can work more? And I was like, no, I want to be part of my kid's life too. I didn't realize that when I joined that job. So anyway, long story short, it ended up not being a good fit, and we decided ultimately that the best decision was going to be to move again. But remember, we're only 4 years in, and so the agreement that we came to was, okay, you can go on the job market and find a job, which I did at the University of Utah. Martha Eining was instrumental in hiring me, but Martha will say, she said, okay, hire me, but I'm not coming for 12 months. And that was the compromise we made. I'll take the job, but I'm only going to go to a school that will let me continue to work for 12 more months where I am, to give Monty the bandwidth to kind of get his head around the idea that we were moving again. And so, it's just trying to find ways to make it work for both. But it isn't easy. It can be challenging. Just be kind to each other. That's probably the best advice I can give. Any other questions? Uh-oh. Any other questions?
Right here. For someone who maybe doesn't think very accounting minded or struggles with accounting in general, and is trying to own and operate your own small business or just kind of get into the world of accounting, think more like an accountant, what are some tips that you would give to someone who just wants to have a better grasp at that or maybe become better at overall accounting?
Yeah. So is the business small enough that you could manage it by hand?
Yeah.
Okay, then that would be my best advice to you, would be to actually set up your general ledger and do journal entries, do it all by hand. Because that's how you're going to see the whole picture. It's hard when you're using QuickBooks or something like that when you're first starting out. It's just doing all the accounting for you, so you really can't kind of get an understanding of why, what's sort of happening behind the scenes. That actually, when I was studying accounting, that was my first job. So I was in a co-op program at Wilfrid Laurier where we would work a semester and then go to school for 2 semesters, then work again. And when I went out on the market to get my first co-op position, my entire class got hired by public accounting firms. There was one student in the entire class of 120 students that did not get hired by a public accounting firm. Me. In fact, I got through that entire job market and I didn't have a job. And I'm freaking out because we got no money. I need to get a job. And I ended up getting a job at the head office for Home Hardware, which is kind of like, what would be the equivalent in the U.S.? Ace Hardware. It's like Ace Hardware. And so I ended up going and working for a woman who was their controller. And I ended up doing a ton of accounting by hand. And that ended up being the best experience I ever had. In fact, the first thing she had me do, this sounds crazy because we don't need to worry about this stuff anymore, but the very first thing she had me do for the first week that I was on the job was take the phone book and add the numbers to learn how to use a 10 key. I can still whip around on a 10 key pretty quick. But it was very tactile experience, and that really helped me to sort of see how the mechanics of accounting fit together.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome. So my husband put up his hand, those of you who didn't see why I was sort of cringing. All right, you can go ahead.
What's your favorite song to play on the drums?
Oh, my favorite song to play on the drums. He keeps trying to get me to go back to playing the drums. That's why he's asking this question. Probably Sweet Child of Mine. Yeah, I gotta say that one's a pretty good one. I like that one. Yes.
What unique perspective do you bring to the board that enhances its decision-making and benefits the financial reporting standards?
Thank you for asking that question. So the board is made up of 7 members. 3 of the 7 come from public accounting. One comes from a job as a controller, a CFO, so a preparer perspective. Two were investors, and so they have a user orientation. And then I bring the academic perspective. So I think what that allows me to do, so I'm not as in the weeds, for example, as my public accounting colleagues, right? They can say, well, according to, subtopic 985-605-43679AB, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, where's that? Where's that? Okay. So they've got that technical, really deep technical background. I think what I bring to the board is the ability to be above the fray and to look at the economics of the transaction and to think more conceptually about, well, what's the asset? What's the liability? How should we measure it? Why would that provide decision useful information to investors? So having kind of that more overarching theoretical or conceptual perspective, which then married with the practical, hopefully ends up getting us to a point where we can have a practical solution, but because it's got this foundational conceptual basis, it helps us to be more consistent over time. So I can give you a perfect example, and it's not that long ago. So we had an issue that came to the FASB. It was not-for-profit organizations, and not-for-profits were getting donated pharmaceuticals. And according to the accounting standards, they have to measure, they have to record an asset. See, I said I wasn't going to get into debits or credits. I'm going to try not to use the word debit. They have to record an asset for the pharmaceuticals that they got, and they have to record it at fair value. Well, sometimes there's restrictions on how they can use those pharmaceuticals. For example, they may have the restriction that they're not allowed to use them in the US. They have to use them in another country. And so the question was, well, if the pharmaceutical is worth $100 without a restriction, should that restriction be taken into consideration in valuing those pharmaceuticals? And what is surprising to some folks is the answer is actually no. Okay, and I'm not going to go into the details why, but there's so many things in financial statements, like take restricted cash, right? If you've got cash and you can only use that cash to pay back a particular liability, is that worth less than cash that you can use for anything? Maybe, but are we going to say, well, I'm going to record that cash on my books at 90 cents instead of $1? Like that just doesn't make any sense. So it's the same kind of issue, okay? So anyway, we made the decision, no, you do not take the restriction into account. Done. We issued that standard. About 2 months later, another issue comes up. This time it was shares, stock that a company gets when they are engaged with another company that is an initial public offering. And they get these shares, and the shares are restricted. They're not allowed to sell those shares for, let's say, 6 months, till the end of what's called a lockup period. So the question was, well, should those shares be recorded at fair value or at fair value less some discount for the restriction? Now, the previous decision had been a 7-0 vote on the board, 7-0. Everybody unanimously said those donated pharmaceuticals with restrictions have to be at full fair value. The restrictions of the stock, 3 board members are like, oh my gosh, no, this is stock. We need to take that restriction into consideration. And I said, what's the difference? It's exactly the same transaction. So, I actually called the staff out on it, and we ended up, those 3 board members ultimately did dissent, but 4 board members ultimately made the same decision. So I think sometimes we get very in the weeds. We kind of forget to think about the consistency across standards. So that's, I would say, I think the thing that I bring to the board that's unique. Thank you.
I have a question over here.
Sure.
Wondering, so with a lot of opportunities, sometimes we don't know or maybe don't feel qualified for certain positions. Wondering if you've ever felt that way, and if so, how you've navigated through that situation.
All the time. Every single time. This is a thing that's particularly, I would say, it's common to everybody. You always sort of feel like you've got imposter syndrome, how did I end up here? Don't quite know. Maybe I'm not quite as smart as everybody else, or, don't have the same skill sets or whatever. I think that is a very, very common thing that we all think, it's unique to us, but I think it's a very common thing. Studies have shown it's actually even more prominent among women. So we, as women, have to fight against that even more. I actually think, fake it till you make it is actually not a bad, a bad way to think about it. Because the reality is, you're never going to be 100% ready for any position you're asked to do, because you haven't done it before. If you're growing, right? If you're growing, you're not just making all lateral moves. You're moving into things that are going to be outside of your comfort zone. It's the same thing with learning, right? If you're very comfortable in your classes, you're probably not learning anything. It's when you're outside your comfort zone that you're learning. So I guess what I would just say is, don't let that fear stop you from taking on a challenge. Just say, okay, I don't know everything. I'm going to go in, I'm going to ask a lot of questions. I'm going to try to learn from the people around me. When I joined the FASB, I thought, wow, like I don't know the technical details and the codification the way that my other colleagues know, but I do feel like I've got something to share. And the best way for me to get up to speed in a new environment is to just be honest with people. I would say to all of the staff as I met them, you know what, I'm brand new. I'm just learning. I've got a ton to learn. And I will, ask a lot of questions, and I'm going to apologize right off the bat. Some of those questions could be stupid, and I'm sorry, but that's how I'm going to get up to speed really quickly. And they were so welcoming and just really took the time to work with me because they knew that I cared. They knew that they need good board members. The staff really, really care about what we do too, and so they really care about the quality of the board members too. So they were really vested in helping me to get up to speed. But yeah, I did not feel like, oh man, I'm just walking in and I've got this, right? So, that's one example. When one thing that Dean Allen and I share is that we both served as president of the American Accounting Association. Wow, I had no idea, what that was going to be like, and that was pretty scary saying yes when the call came to do that. But boy, I learned so much. And it was such a great experience that I'm glad that I didn't stop and say, well, I don't know that I have all the skills or that I'm like perfectly or even close to prepared for this. But I know that there's people around me that see something, so they must think that I'm going to be okay, and I'm just going to learn along the way. Thanks for that question.
Christine. Thank you. My microphone's not working. So I just want to thank you for coming and sharing so many wonderful personal examples and what great advice to our students to recognize that everybody struggles, that it's okay to fail, it's okay to make mistakes, that good leaders need confidence and courage and to dream without a doubt. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you. And we welcome those who are planning on lunch. Please come down and please feel free to come down and ask additional questions of the speaker as we prepare to move upstairs. And thanks for your attendance today. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.